Welcome to the Right to Ignite podcast, where we talk to authors who are writing to ignite the next generation with a heart for the Lord. I'm Kyle Morgan. My co-host Brenda Covert will hopefully pop in for the second half. Speaking of half, have you ever told a half-truth? One of those lies by omission, where it's not the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Well, our guest today wrote a book with that very title, Half-Truths. Before turning to writing for children, Carol Baldwin published Friendship Counseling, Biblical Foundations for Helping Others, and Teaching the Story, fiction writing in grades 4 through 8. Carol enjoys teaching writing and has presented at many educators and writing conferences. She has been published widely in newspapers and magazines, and along with Rebecca Wheeler, co-publishes Talking Story, a newsletter for educators and media specialists. She served as a SCBWI Carolinas critique group leader and the blog coordinator for many years. She manages the Right to Ignite blog and is a volunteer publicist for Monarch Educational Press. Her debut young adult historical novel, Half-Truths, was published in April 2025 by Monarch. Carol, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate being here.
Yes. I gotta say, I'm really enjoying Half-Truths, but I did have to stop reading it for a while because you write in present tense and I write in past tense. And all of a sudden, my chapters were starting to be written in present tense.
Oh, no. Oh, that's funny.
But
Well,
I think I got it figured out now. But I wanted to start with a very basic question. What is your definition of a half truth?
oh, wow. You didn't tell me about that question ahead of time. I think of it as a statement, which is, half true. It's sort of true that Kate was going, for example, Kate was going out in the evening to research. That's what she told her grandparents, but she didn't say where she was going. And so, because she knew that they wouldn't approve of where she was going. So that's an example from the book. And, we tell ourselves half truths all the time. We'll say, oh, it's okay if I talk about somebody, it's not really gossip, but oh, well, maybe it is. We give ourselves sometimes permission, if you will, permission to sin, and we don't really want to admit what the truth is. So,
Yeah, I like that. Now, Kate is your main character, and you said she goes off and researches. So this is a historical novel, but it's set in what, 1950?
right, 1950.
So there are people who are still alive who remember this time period. This isn't just,
Right.
historical documents kind of research. This is more journalistic. Like, how did you research for this?
Well, that's a great question. And there were three basic ways. One was reading books, and I have a stack of books that I can show everybody. You want to hear about that. Um, the second was going places in Charlotte because there are still a few places that exist, although Charlotte has not done a good job of preserving its history, and everybody in Charlotte says that. And the third is by talking to people. So that's what you just mentioned, that there are people that are still alive who were alive then, although they're dying out. So some of the people that I talked to have already passed away. Um, but I was fortunate to talk to about 100 people, both blacks and whites, either who lived in Charlotte at the time or knew somebody who lived here, but it pretty much all Charlotteans.
Wow.
So yeah, so those are the three ways I researched.
You researched this how long ago?
I first started it about 18 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been around a long time because I knew I was a writer. I had written in magazines and newspapers, but I had never written fiction before. It was all pretty much like I could describe anything to you. I can look out my window, I can describe what I see, but using my imagination to come up with a whole new story, that was scary to me. But it's something I really wanted to do. And so I took the plunge without knowing what was involved. So,
Yeah, that's That's a long journey.
It is a long journey. It is. And there were people in my life who said, why are you still doing this? Why don't you just self-publish it? Isn't it done? You're just fixing commas, all things like that. And like most of those people were not writers. The people who were writers in my life understood why I was doing draft after draft after draft because I was first of all, I hadn't ever written a novel, so I had to learn how to write a novel, which is very different than writing nonfiction. Yeah, you're shaking your head because you know
Yeah.
it's so different. And I was discovering the story too. And that story discovery was one of the reasons why it took 18 years because I knew the story, but I kept going off in other directions and writing about romances and deaths and things that I thought should be in the book, and they're not in the book because that wasn't the main story. The main story is the relationship between Katie and Lillian, and that's what I kept going off of.
What was it about this story that you kept coming back? And how much of this is it, I mean, is it semi-autobiographical? Because you grew up in the Carolinas.
No, no, no. I grew
No.
up in South Jersey.
Oh, okay.
In New Jersey. No, the furthest south I had gone was Washington, D.C. before I moved to North Carolina.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. You asked me two questions, which isn't fair. What was the first one? Because I'm on the I can tell, I'll tell you the autobiographical part first, and then you
Yeah.
can repeat the first part of your question. So it is not autobiographical. It is not about Carol, but it is about Carol. We all put ourselves into our book. We write what we know, and I would interview, I would have little documents where I would have Carol as Kate or Kate as Carol, and I would interview Kate. And I think a lot of her answers are probably my answers, particularly if it's first person point of view. But I didn't know how much it was like me until well, when I finished the first draft and I read the first draft, and this was years ago, I sort of teared up because a person in my life had said, Carol, you really need to develop a voice. And I was like, oh, I think I just developed a voice. And then fast forward 18 years, just recently, when a friend of mine who knows me very well, she's a college friend who's known me for 50 years, she read it and she said, Carol, this is you. And I was like, this is your story. So, yeah, I'm in there. I'm in there. I mean, I was transplanted from from New Jersey to Charlotte. So Kate moves from a rural area to an urban area and feels like a fish out of the water. And so did I too. So I also did anyway, you know what I mean. Um, but also well, then she wants to be a journalist. For a while there, she wanted to be a photographer. And then I was like, I can't remember why I switched, but it's like, I don't know anything about photography, but I know about wanting to be a writer. So, um, that's me. But there's also, as I'm reading through it now, I'm just now reading through it again, in, able to hold it in my hands. I'm like, yeah, there's me. There's me. So, um, yeah, but oh, I think this is what you asked me. You said, why did I like the story? Why did I keep going?
Yeah.
I just really liked Kate and Lillian, the characters. I really liked them a lot. I used to think I want to be like Kate when I grow up. Um, I just like their spunkiness and their courage. And am a person who likes to connect to people. Um, my publisher, Jen Lowry, that's why she asked me to be her volunteer publicist because I like to connect to people. And that's part of the story is how Kate and Lillian learned to connect. And I don't know if you caught that Lillian's last name is Bridges, but I did that on
Mm.
purpose, some of the names just got thrown in there, but there are a few of them that really have meaning to them. And so bridge building between people and family hurts and that the whole backstory, not that I had that backstory in my family at all, but I have seen the older I get, the more I see how our ancestor stories or the previous generation anyway influences our story. And unless we come to grips with that, with what we've learned, unless we confront it, just going to keep on passing it on. So a lot of the beliefs in there are my beliefs.
I wanted to ask more about the time period. How
Oh,
much?
my hat is from
Yes,
the time period. Okay. You all
yes,
need to
you're.
know that. And you can't see my whole dress, but I'm wearing a 1950s dress too.
Did you have some songs in there as well? And I wondered if you had like written down a soundtrack of, all the songs in that. I would love to see, maybe we can put a link in the podcast, but like a Spotify playlist or something of
Huh.
all the songs because it definitely has a soundtrack to it.
That's funny because, okay, I have to write that down, Spotify. So I do not have a list, but a friend of mine does
Okay.
because I had it playing in the background at my book launch, and I bet she can still put it together for me. I think she probably chat GBT'd it or something like that. But I'm so focused on the things I have to do with my book that whenever I can delegate a job, I delegated a job and I delegated that to her. So I don't have it, but I can get it for you.
Yeah.
But mostly how I found those was I just Googled, the popular music at the time. And I actually took that from another book that I read that was written that take place in World War II. And that author, I can't remember the name of the book now, which is awful, but that author used a lot of music. And I thought that's really clever
Yeah.
to use the music. But, a lot of people write with music in the background. I need quiet. I totally need quiet. I mean, that would have been so distracting to me. So, but
Yeah, it's
I'll get you that list.
yeah. Because I could hear some of the songs, as I'm reading it,
Hmm.
kind of playing in the background.
Hmm. But I could tell you about one of the songs in there, the Bushel and a Peck song. Now that was a song that my mom and dad would sing.
Oh, okay.
So that's why that's in there. And I think that that's the only one that I could sing along to, probably. None of the rest were, they were just a little bit before my time. But it's interesting because when you're doing research for 1950, you really start earlier than that. Because although there were popular songs then, there were also popular songs in the 40s that stayed, around for a while.
That's a good
So.
point.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't even thought about that. But Joyce Hostetter, who was our last masterclass teacher, she has been my mentor and she has been amazing. And she said things like, yeah, you have to research far and wide, and internationally, nationally, and locally. And she was right. Oh.
Yeah, there's something that feels so um not journalistic, but more like a diary about this, where it feels, very believable of that you are immersed in this world. Like it's not, somebody from now talking about it. It feels like they're writing it down as it's happening.
Hmm. That's
And
cool.
and I think
That's
one of the
cool.
things that really helps with that is the little newspaper headlines, at the start of each chapter. Like, how hard was that to find all of those?
It was hard, really hard. In fact, if you were going to ask me about what are the hardest things, that's one of the hardest things because they are really hard to find. And I was very picky because I wanted them about what was going on in the chapter. So that's part of the reason why there's some fictional ones in there because there was just absolutely nothing I could find. Um, but also what made it difficult is that in the beginning, the story was set in 1953. So all the headlines I got in the beginning were wrong.
Mm,
So I had to come up with new ones. And so it's very time consuming to do, but of course now I'm glad that I did it. But at the time I was grumbling. And I did it because a friend of mine, her debut middle grade book takes place in Hiroshima during World War II, and she pulled headlines for all of her chapters. And I was
okay.
like, oh yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. I'll do it. No, not knowing how hard it would be. Um, so
Yeah, because I mean, I've tried to look at some newspaper stuff, and it's, there's paywalls there. Some of them haven't been archived and scanned. So did you have
Oh
to
yeah.
go there in person?
I started out by going to uh, Charlotte Mecklenburg Library and going through the microfilm, and that's how I started because that was before things were online the way they are now. And I still have copies of articles. I glanced over to my filing cabinet because I still have them in there. I never really looked at them after I copied them, but it was like my security blanket. I knew that they were there. And so I was building that reservoir, which is, I think, a mixed metaphor now, but I was building that as part of what would later come out in the book. I really wanted to be able to quote the Charlotte Post, which was the black newspaper at the time,
Mm,
but none of that was archived.
yeah.
None of it at all. So that was part of the reason I have a few black newspapers from other areas of the country, um, because I couldn't get it here. I couldn't get the one in Charlotte.
Yeah,
So,
that's it's so interesting because yeah, I hadn't thought of that when you first started doing research, the of what was available online was very
hmm
different than what it is
right.
now.
Right, right. So I'm going to show you, since we're talking about newspapers, I'm going to show you one of the books, show everybody. This is a book that I used a lot. It's Virus of Fear by Horace Carter. So he appears in chapter one in Half Truths, just for although those of you who are watching and haven't read the book, he was a newspaper editor of a very small newspaper in Tabor City, North Carolina. And the book starts out there, and that's where Kate lives before she moves to Charlotte. And Horace Carter won a Pulitzer Prize for his newspaper work in
Wow.
and reporting against the KKK. Yeah. So it took me another hard thing was figuring out where I was going to start the book, but Joyce helped me pin that down. And when I realized I was going to start with that, that was pretty dramatic, a dramatic start to the book. But here again, so in here are a bunch of his articles and his editorials. So I got a few of the titles from this book. And then I went to Tabor City to visit just to see what it was like. There's not a whole lot left. It was small then, and it's even smaller now. Um, but a lady at a library looked up, somehow she gave me a list of headlines because that's what I
Oh,
wanted
wow.
was headlines. So that was helpful too.
This book is very specific on the setting. It's very specific of where it takes place. So how has the reception been there locally? You know, because is are there many books that have been written about this time period, about this moment in the Carolinas?
That's another really good question. I love your questions, Kyle. I don't, I mean, the book's only been out a month. So I don't know if anybody in Tabor City has read it. I have a contact with a journalist there and I need to bug him about, I sent him the PDF of the book and I haven't heard from him. And he was interested in writing something about it. So I don't know when people read that, how they will feel about it. But remind me and I'll come back to that. But in Charlotte, so Charlotte is made up of a lot of people who have moved here, but every once in a while you meet a real Charlottean, someone who grew up here, and most of those people are just like, yeah, that's the way it was. They're finding it very authentic, both whites and blacks so far. But again, it's really brand new.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's I can't answer that fully yet.
Yeah.
But so far the reception has been unbelievable. I've just been um, blessed by a lot of five-star reviews. What can I say? It's really been amazing. Um, but I wanted to say to get back to Tabor City and what people thought of it. Okay, that's what you asked me. When I went to Tabor City, I thought I was going to try to find some seniors, thinking that those would be people who lived through this period and I could ask them about it. So I went to a senior center and to their lunch. I figured a lot of senior centers that they serve lunch to seniors. And when they introduced me, they must have said that I wanted to, that I was, or I said that I was writing a book about 1950 in Tabor City, and I was curious to know if anybody was, had witnessed the KKK coming through the town, because that's where it starts in half-truths, but that's a historic event, really happened. And there were two women there who I heard them sort of grumble something about the KKK was really good for us. And they got up and left.
Oh, wow.
So there are people, and obviously still people, who s perceive the KKK in a different way. Yeah, I know. It's hard to
That's
believe.
crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy to us, but the KKK tried to do good works kind of a thing. And I mean, you can read if you want to read stuff online about the pro KKK, but they were, you could just see how their beliefs, even in their 80s, hadn't changed, you know? And they were not interested in talking to me at all, although I would have loved to talk to them.
Yeah.
But no, they weren't interested at all.
Yeah, that brings such an interesting question where this is historical and things have changed, but at the same time, this is still very applicable. This is still very, very much going on. What have you seen with Charlotte now in compared to what it was in 1950? Are they going in the right track to this? Does it seem to be kind of, slipping back? Does it kind of ebb and flow? Like what?
Well, I think asking a person who's white and asking a person who's black, you'll get two different answers.
Probably.
Okay. Because everywhere I go, pretty much everywhere I go is integrated now, which is like not was it Kate's experience 70 years ago.
Yeah.
We certainly don't have, black and white restrooms or lunch counters or water fountains or any of that. We don't, I go to the Y and there's black people in my class, but from a black point of view, like, okay, so I have to tell you about one of the people I interviewed who lived through this is still alive. And she'll say that things are going backwards, that she is concerned about this country and some of the racism that she's blind, so she's not reading it. She's probably hearing about it on television or other people are telling her about it. But yeah, I mean, she said that to me probably 5 years ago.
Wow.
Um, so I think it depends on your experience, totally what your experience is. And she would agree that there's not the segregation in schools that like Kate experienced. Thankfully, that's not
Yeah.
there, but there is still discrepancies. And still, I think one of the things that I became aware of was my own racism that
Mm.
I was not aware of, that is so very subtle. Yeah, I think that that's the same with Kate, is that she realizes that more about herself than she knew.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so you so you learned as
I
you were
did.
writing. And
I
so,
did. I really did. I did. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. And it's so cool to see because, it feels like, sometimes we have progressed a lot, but then also, like you said, there are people still alive from that time period. That's
Hmm.
not that far removed.
Mm-mm. No. And there's also still KKK groups around.
Is it really?
Yeah, a friend of
Wow.
mine sent me an article about something going on in the Boston area. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it ties into the whole white supremacy thing. So, yeah, it's not as blatant, if you will. We don't have those signs in our faces, but it is still there. Yeah. Um, I just finished listening to The Color of Compromise. I don't remember the name of the author. I should, but it was written by a black minister, and he talks about the racism in the church.
Mm.
And that was eye-opening. And it's still going on in terms of
Yeah.
white supremacy and where the roots of that are.
And
So,
segregation.
mhm,
I mean,
yeah,
a lot of the churches, they're not openly segregated, but at the same time they're, pretty, what do you say, homogenous or
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So what was the Christian influence of half-truths?
So, because I'm a Christian, I hope that everything I do, well, I pray that that my writing will glorify the Lord. And that is really important to me. So I was intentional that I wanted to make this a book that would be for the general audience, but that also would communicate biblical principles. So obviously, the first biblical principle that we have here is truth speaking and the importance of truth speaking. And Lillian's grandmother is the one who is most clearly a Christian, and she's the one who with the Bible verses. And I think that that is fits the period that the Black Christians were more verbal about their faith, perhaps. And I don't see Kate's grandparents, although they're churchgoers, I don't see them as really strong Christians. So that Kate is getting that through Lillian's grandmother. So truth speaking is one of those principles, and the whole principle of um, along with truth speaking is if you mess up, you need to confess it. If when we sin, we need to confess it. I don't label it a sin in the book, but there's a big mess up between Kate and Lillian, and she takes a while before she asks Lillian for forgiveness. But the whole point of reconciliation between two people who have been separated because of sin and wrongdoing is so important to me personally, and I hope that readers will take that away from the book. And that those themes, so we have truth speaking, reconciliation, and social justice. I think that social justice is something that the scriptures speak to, and hopefully it'll be pretty obvious in the book. I was just curious about what it was like here before civil rights.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you could see that it hadn't always been this way.
right, right. And I was curious to know some of the people or to hear about some of the people who led up to that civil rights. So, for example, in the book is Kelly Alexander. So he was the head of the NAACP here in Charlotte. And so he has a little cameo appearance in the book, but he was instrumental in um, school integration and integration of restaurants, and probably more than that that I'm not remembering right now. He was also active in the national level too. Um, so a part of why I wrote it is because I think that both white and black kids, I mean, it's a book for teens, although right now I think it's more adults that are reading it than teens. Um, but I really want teens to know that part of the history, that it's not lost and it hasn't always been the way it is now.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I think I think people would be, surprised somewhat to know that, it feels like a long time ago, but then at the same time, people are still alive from that time period.
Hmm.
We're still we're still watching movies, we're still listening to music from the time period. Like
Right.
it's
Hmm.
no some people are still driving around cars from that time period.
That's
I mean,
true.
it's
That is true. Yeah.
and with that, like, where did you find photographs? Because, you said the town does not look the same. Like, how did you create that look for yourself? Because
That's
you
another
had to
great
kind of
question.
mentally recreate the
Hmm.
town.
Well, parts of the town. So this is where the nonfiction part of me comes in. It's like I want something real to look at. I would never be able to write fantasy. Like, I just totally couldn't do that. But if you're on Pinterest, anybody's on Pinterest, I think you don't even need to friend me, but find me, Carol Baldwin, and I have a ton of boards of images that I found. So there's a board that's just about goats. There's a board because there's a goat in the book. There's a board about farms and about tobacco farms. There's a board about household items. So I would find things and put them on that in Pinterest so that later, if I needed to describe it, I would have a place to go to. So that was really helpful. And like tobacco farming, I didn't know anything about tobacco farming, but I talked to a few people who remembered picking tobacco as kids. So
Yeah,
they could tell me,
and you said you came from New Jersey.
right.
So yeah, so you didn't grow up rural at all.
No, no, no. Mm-mm, no, I didn't. No, but the part about a hands being stained after you pick tobacco, that was a friend of mine who said that her hands were stained. So I really just like got other people's stories. I just pick and choose of other people's stories. So Pinterest has been helpful. The other thing that was really cool is that I met a man, and I can't remember how I met him, but he grew up in Myers Park, which is where Kate moves to, and his grandparents' home was next to his house, and his grandparents' home had been turned into condominiums, and he knew the
Mm.
person who owned it, and he got me in there.
Oh
And
wow.
so that became Kate's home there. So I had that in my mind, and I had pictures on my computer, tons of pictures. And so, the outside, I described a little bit of way their outside is. I mean, I added he didn't have horse stable. He didn't have a field in the back. But at the time period, the yards were much bigger and there was a lot of wood. So, and some people did have animals in their backyard. Well, way in the back kind of a thing. The library, was modeled after that. The staircase she comes down is definitely modeled after that. And then the Cherry neighborhood, which is the black neighborhood where Lillian lives, is still exists. It's a couple miles away from Myers Park. And one of the men that I met, who is no longer with us, he's one of the men I dedicated the book to, Price Davis. He lived in Cherry, so he took me around Cherry and he showed me the house that he grew up in and the very, small neighborhood. It's now being gentrified. So that's difficult for the blacks who are living there who have lived there for generations. So some of it I made up. Ivy's department store downtown isn't there, but I used to go to department stores in Philadelphia when I was little, so I could imagine that it was the same. I was born in 53,
Okay.
so it's just before my childhood, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my parents would have been adults at that time.
So it was, you still kind of grew up with a little bit of the
Yes.
remaining
Yes.
50s culture and everything.
Yes.
So,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I still have my gloves that I wore at that time. So gloves went into the 60s, hats went into the 60s, but then pretty much died out after that.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Korean War because the Korean War
Mm.
has a little bit of a, subplot in there.
Hmm.
And so how did you find, because, the Korean War is definitely, I think there's two different thoughts. There's how we look back at it and how it was viewed at the time. And there seems to be very different views of the Korean War. So how did you find the historical one without kind of our modern looking back?
I have no idea. I don't know if I can answer that. It's funny though, because at one point that was going to be a bigger part of the story. I went off on that. And because I was going to tell more of Lillian's brother's story. And so
Mm,
we were going to hear more of that about being a black soldier in Korea. And but then I took all that out because I had gotten away from the story kernel, which is an unlikely friendship between a black girl and a white girl in 1950. But I mean, I listened to a book about Korea and I looked at books and I mean, there's a lot of stuff online. So, and because I don't have many scenes set there,
yeah.
but actually, I went into that pretty deeply, but then it ended up not using it. But there is a lot of information there's a lot of information about the black soldiers because that was the first time, if I've got this right, that the army was integrated. But so you see some pictures of black and white soldiers together, but pretty much like I interviewed a man now lives in Florida, and he was in the Korean War as a black man, but he was driving a truck, and he said that's what most of the blacks were,
Mm,
they were relegated to those kind of jobs.
yeah. So you learned from what Joyce said about focusing the story.
I did. I did. She was one of the ones who brought me back to my story because I was going off kilter. And I think that's one of the problems with research is everything you find, you want to put into your story.
Yeah.
You just think it's so also good.
One of my questions was, you had this whole historical book. So now for people who have read this book and like it and want to read something else, like what's another author of a historical novel that you would recommend that you love what they're doing?
Well, I have to recommend Joyce's books
That's what I
because
thought you'd say.
because Joyce Hofstadter, as I mentioned earlier, she's been my mentor and she was really, I loved her books. And we have talked extensively about all the things that I tried to do and put into my book. And so hers take place in Hickory, North Carolina. They are about the polio epidemic in Hickory. And when she was writing them, her editor, well, actually, before she wrote the first one, Blue, her editor told her to find the story in her own backyard. And so that was in my head as I was working on Half Truths. What is the story that could have happened here? And what's the story that's buried under the streets? But you see how that even that theme of the story in your own backyard that her editor told her comes across in Half Truths.
Yeah.
So I would recommend hers. And I know I have, if you're really curious, look on my website, Carol Baldwin Books, look under my blog and just put in historical fiction and you'll see other books that I recommend.
Well, Brenda, I think I am out of questions, so you came just in time.
All right. Well, sorry I'm late.
That's
My
okay.
daughter was held over. I was trying to pick her up from work, and I'm out there biting my nails. Anywho, I wanted to ask if you have a favorite character in your book or one that was especially fun to write.
Well, I like both Kate and Lillian. I think about Kate. I think I always, would like to be like her when I grow up. I want to be like Kate. But both, I admire the courage of both girls, and I like them both. Um, Josie was sort of fun to write, the goat, and but I don't know that I made her mischievous enough because goats are pretty mischievous. So I'm not sure if I made her as had to her full potential, if you will. As part of research, I went and saw goats a couple times, held baby goats, smelled baby goats, the goat smell.
Did you do goat yoga?
No. What is goat yoga? Did not do goat yoga.
I don't know. I've seen it on TV. Something about trying to do yoga while goats get on your back or just,
Oh,
you know,
I don't think I
be
would want
very
to do that.
goatish. And I suppose it's fun, but I don't quite, I don't quite get the point.
Might be good
Um,
promotion for the book, though.
Yeah.
was there a scene that was the hardest to write?
So it was really hard to write, to figure out how to write when Kate realizes the whole truth about her great grandfather and and leaking that out a little bit at a time. Lillian figures it out first. That I rewrote a bunch. That was hard. And um I moved pieces of chapters several times. And now I'm just now reading it since it's been published. I'm just now reading it. I haven't gotten to that. And so I'm hoping that it reads pretty smoothly, but it wasn't. It was hard to figure out. Now it seems like, oh, of course. But it was hard to get the nuances that I wanted in there and the authentic reactions from the characters in there. So that was hard. Good question.
Well, what advice would you give to writers that are tackling difficult topics for a younger audience?
Be careful. Um, Make sure you get sensitivity readers along the line who can help you with that. Um,
Good point.
I'd say be as empathetic towards your characters, and the people who are telling you about these sensitive issues. Like, really listen. If you're interviewing people, really listen to them hard so that you see what they are saying and what it means to them, what they are sharing with you. I mean, that's really precious when somebody opens up a hard part of their life to you. So you want to be not reverent, but respectful, really respectful of that other person, and make sure you get it right. I dedicated the book to two men. One is Price Davis, who had taken me through the Cherry neighborhood, which is where the blacks lived at the time. Still partly is, but not all the way. And I would call him multitudes of times to check on little details, tiny little details, probably not even in the book details now, because so much was edited out. But he would say, Carol, just be authentic, be authentic. And that is what I would say, be authentic. And also then, so you be authentic about your subject material, but as well as being careful of who is going to read it. Now, you cannot predict who's going to pick up your book in a bookstore or a library and read it, but being sensitive to a young reader. So I always knew that I didn't want to have any explicit sex scenes in the book. I mean, that's not who I am. And Monarch is clean reads, and I knew I didn't want that. But then that was also very difficult to write. How do I write about this relationship between a slave owner and a slave? That was also really difficult. And um, I just did the best I could.
Okay.
Good question.
Did you talk about the book that you're working on now?
No, we didn't do that because we didn't get around to it, and also because I don't have time to write right now because I'm so busy promoting the book. But the next book is one I've already started, but then I stopped about a year ago because there was just too much work to do with half truths. But it will be actually Kate's paternal grandfather story. So it's going to be 1893 in South Jersey, and he is a glass blower's apprentice. So it's going to be a child labor story. And there's more to it than that, but that's enough to say. It'll be middle grade book.
And it will involve a lot of research,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah, some of which I've already done. I mean, I can go ahead and keep on writing it and hopefully not stop as often to research it as I did with half truths.
Don't make
So
us wait 18 years for the next
18
book.
years.
I don't have 18 years. I don't think I have another 18 years. So, but
Okay, I have one last question.
okay.
Can you share one practical habit or mindset that helps you stay focused on your writing?
I went off the story so many times, and that was one of the reasons why it took me so long. But so there's just to stay focused on your story, write down and pin it somewhere where you read it all the time. What is this? What is your story kernel? What is it, the main thing that you are writing about? And but I have to tell you, I knew it clearly in my head. I still didn't do it. It took Joyce to bring me back to that. And one other beta reader, developmental or beta reader, who said, Carol, this isn't about boyfriends. This isn't, like I had given everybody a boyfriend and went off into the music and the dancing and all that kind of stuff. I said, that's not your story. So stay true to what your story is. But when you first started asking me that, I thought you meant like staying focused as a writer in your butt and chair kind of a thing. And I think
Well,
that
that could be it too.
yeah, I think it is, that it is a lot of work. It is alone work, and I'm not very good at turning off my email or not, I don't get on social media during the day too much, but to focus on if you have an hour or you have 20 minutes or whatever you have, shut the door and that's all you're doing. That is all you're doing. And even if it's a short period of time, don't not do it because you don't have a lot of time, because you can't wait until you have a lot of time, because that may not happen. Even
That's true.
a little piece at a time is worth doing.
Good
Uh,
answer. Good
Good
answer.
question. Good questions. Great questions.
Yes, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, I
Oh,
can't
it's
wait to hear the rest of the podcast.
Yeah.
well,
Well,
this has been fun.
Yeah, and it's fun to see you in your hat. I
Yes, my
love your
hat.
hat.
Yes. So let me just show this one book, okay? So we were talking about some of the books that I read, and this is referenced in the book. Blue Willow is a story that both girls read. And when I picked that there was going to be Blue Willow china in it, it was so random. I went on Facebook and I said, I need some china. What kind of should I use in my book? And several people said Blue Willow. I had no idea that there was this book. And then
Wow.
that made it such a great thing that they could both connect to and they both could relate to the character for different reasons. And it becomes a part of the mystery and the connection between the families. And it won a Newbery Honor in the 30s. It's a
nice.
classic.
Wow. I love that. I love that.
Well,
So
you could win Half Truths by Carol Baldwin. Carol was gracious enough to offer a giveaway, and here's how you enter. You leave a review of this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Take a screenshot and send that screenshot to contact@righttoignite.com. That's contact@righttoignite.com, and you could be the winner. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will tune into the next episode. Keep writing and igniting those hearts for the Lord. Thank you so much, Carol.
thank you.